Hello and welcome back to Defense Diaries. It's our second time. We obviously had the Reed hearing all day today, but we are back for a show that I'm very, very excited about. And I am, of course, joined by my beautiful and brilliant co-host, Allie. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all. I'm going to have to insist, because I think we're making this alive, that you redo that intro.
Okay.
Well, you know what? We'll do our hellos. We'll tell people about it. Then you'll intro. Then we'll
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And we'll let people start coming in. So we are going to do this ad free. I've turned off the ads because I don't want you guys to have to get inundated with those horrific YouTube ads that just so violently rip into these lives. So I'll add them for replay though. So if you're missing it live, I don't know what to tell you. You're gonna have to catch it. You're gonna have to catch it with ads. But for the entire live, it will be ad-free. Additionally, I know Allie has been scoping out the questions, the member questions, as well as
just bear in mind that there is an appeal, there's a post-conviction, there's possibly a second trial, so there's certain questions that we're just not going to be able to ask. But I saw a couple good ones, and I'm gonna incorporate as many as I can. And we'll keep an eye on the super stickers, and I'll sort of ask your questions, but without being like Ann Piccolo asked. And I mentioned Ann because she thanked us for no ads, and thank you for your generosity. All right, so go for it, babe.
Okay, so you want me to do a redo?
Our new members, yeah.
Okay. Okay, you ready? You ready to do it? Okay. Welcome to the divide. Oopsie, I butchered it on the first go. Welcome to the docket. Welcome to the docket presented by Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and I am once again joined by I butchered it again. Sorry, Darren.
Continuing coverage of
Darren's going to have to handle it. Welcome to the docket presented by Defense Diaries. I am your host, Bob Mata, and I am once again joined by my beautiful and brilliant co-host, Allie. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all.
So
we are continuing coverage of
the Richard Allen case. So the state of Indiana versus Richard M. Allen. It's the case that never sleeps. It's the case that just keeps on going. And it's a case that we should keep in the forefront of our minds, because I think it's one of those cases that we really need to keep a very, very close eye on, which leads us into tonight's live, because I've been looking forward to this. I've been trying to wrangle our special guests. We have two special guests. One of them, Andrea Burkhart, is a dear friend of ours who we love and adore. She's a brilliant attorney. She's got her own YouTube channel that just crushes it. She is obviously joining us, and we're very, very happy to have her. And our special guest we've never had on, and that is Stacy Eldridge. And Stacy just so happened to be Richard Allen's digital data forensic examiner, who was hired by the team who testified at trial. Stacy's unbelievable. Both Andrea and I were there during the trial. I thought she was magnificent on the stand. In light of some really strange circumstances, which I'm sure we will get into tonight, regarding a Google search that happened during a break, probably unlike anything that Stacy's ever had to deal with. I don't know that any of us have ever had to deal with that in terms of lawyers or expert witnesses. But Stacy is former FBI. She was with them for quite a while. She had a stretch from 2003 to 2012. During that time, she served as an information tech specialist, a forensic examiner on the computer analysis response team, a senior forensic examiner on CART as well, and a digital evidence instructor for CART headquarters. She trains people. She knows her stuff. She currently has her own firm that she is running now. She and we'll ask her. I'll just pull her on and see what she primarily does in terms of her business. But let's bring on Andrea first. Hello.
Hey guys.
So happy to see you.
Oh, good to see you guys again. I have a question for you first before we get into the good stuff. Are you guys going to make it to the Sphere in any of the upcoming weekends?
Yeah,
Bob is definitely out, and I am holding out hope that somehow I'm going to be able to make it. But as it gets closer, then I realize that might not happen. But I'm still holding out hope. I really, really, really need you guys.
Oh, fingers crossed for you.
Yeah, I obviously would definitely want to come, but our daughter has a softball tournament 5 hours away, so that trumps.
That's the weekend of the baby shower. Oh no, that's the weekend of the baby shower. You were supposed to be at
that's
advocacy convention.
That's right.
So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. So without further ado, let's bring on our special guest. You're just the special guest, Andrea. We have.
I don't like.
I'll take it.
So here she is. Hello and welcome, Stacy Eldridge. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're really excited to have you. As you can imagine, the three of us have a million questions. I did not ask you ahead of time how much time you're allocating to us. So I want you to feel free at any time. If it starts to go long, you're like, hey, I got to go. And we will, of course, respect that. And we will bid you a fond farewell. But we're very grateful that you're here. And we're really excited that you're here. So why don't you just tell the people beyond kind of what I described in terms of what you've done in your career, like what are you up to now?
Yeah, so these days I am primarily focusing on doing mobile forensics. I do the digital forensics too, but I'm really trying to focus on doing the iPhone specifically. I prefer to get the criminal defense cases in my own firm, but I do, a mix of whatever stuff that people need their iPhones examined for. And then in addition to running my own business, I am an adjunct professor at a couple different universities where I teach mobile forensics, digital forensics, and a variety of cybersecurity classes. So I stay kind of busy.
A little bit. A little bit. So in terms of at some point during the I guess we'd call it the pretrial period of Richard Allen's case, you were retained by the defense.
Yes.
And when do you think that was approximately initially?
Ms. Azure first contacted me at the beginning of August and, kind of told me a little bit about the case and said, could we retain you? And I said, yep, we could do that. And so we got all the, engagement letters signed. And then it wasn't until the end of August that we had the written report back from Mr. Cecil at the Indiana State Police before I could do anything with the case.
Yeah. And that, I think, because he had done initially a report back in 2019, but then he was wanting to use the most up-to-date version of Cellebrite, right? And that's what you guys were waiting on?
Yeah, I don't know. He was continuing to examine, and so he needed to at least update that written report with some of the things he had talked about in his deposition and had done.
Did they give you a forensic image, like an official forensic image that then you could go and create your own extraction with your own parameters to make sure that they didn't weed anything out?
So they gave me copies of multiple extractions that they had done. They had the initial ones that they did straight away in February, and then they did some more like 7 months later. And then they had, Mr. Cecil had also done one even later with the gray key. So I couldn't do my own extraction because I didn't have the cell phone. So I just worked off of the extractions that they did. And in forensics, the best practice is to only do that one extraction. You can do it like multiple ways, but you're just going to do it at that one time, at that one session when you're hooked up to that tool. You typically aren't shutting the phone on and off and pulling it and extracting it numerous times. Now you can certainly examine with updated versions of software whatever extractions you have. And that's done all the time, right? Because, many years go by and then you're like, well, let's just refresh our memories and see what else we can find. And that's the biggest problem with cell phones is cell phones are released faster than our forensic tools can keep up.
One of the things I remember from your testimony, we heard a lot about there's 3 different types of extractions. There's the basic logical extraction, which is like the lowest kind of level of information you can get from the phone. There's the advanced logical that gives you a little bit more system information or app information. And then there's the full file system, which is really what you want when you're able to get that. It's going to be the most thorough resource that you can have for what's in the phone. So what we heard was that when Mr. Bunner did the first extraction on the phone, he chose to do the logical. And part of your testimony was that you checked to see kind of what was available for that operating system on Libby's phone back at the time, and a more sophisticated extraction could have been done at the time. So my question to you is, do you have any idea from what you reviewed or just from your own experience, why that decision would have been made to do that limited extraction, given what we ultimately found out, which is that can affect the ability to get full information from the phone in subsequent extractions?
I don't know why he did what he did because there were no notes or reports provided to me from Mr. Bunner. My guess is, you can do that logical extraction. That's the really quick one. So if somebody's waiting, that's what you would do to just give them something to start with and go off of. But then you would go back and do that full file system extraction that takes longer.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as data loss, what are the things you're primarily concerned about? Because it's really the mechanism of turning the phone off and on. That's when you experience some loss, right? In this case, the loss sounded like it was pretty important stuff in terms of things that we would have liked to have been able to know, which were lost forever. So can you explain what type of loss is experienced when the phone is powered on and off over time?
Yep. So there's a couple different things we're worried about. First off, there is just like what happens when you turn that phone on and off. There's a log called the current power log, and I harped on that one a lot when I testified because that one has something very important. When was the phone last powered off? And that only stays for that one cycle. So, you turn it on, and then once you shut it off, you've lost that previous power cycle. You don't know when it was last shut off. So all of that evidence was destroyed. And then the power log also contains information like your volume of your ringtone, vibrates. So, and again, it's just kept for that one cycle. So that was gone. And then when you're turning it on and off, you're obviously going to be losing any sort of temporary cache data as well. Some stuff is just temporary. It doesn't live on your phone forever. And then the other thing that you're having to work against is just the numbers game. Some logs are only kept for X number of days. So the longer you wait to get it, it starts dropping that stuff off the older and older it gets. So it's super important to jump on the cell phone and get everything off of it as soon as possible.
So when the 3 extractions that Andrea mentioned, did they actually do 3 separate extractions, or they did it once and then ran it using different settings?
They turned that phone on and off, I don't know how many times, and did how many different things to it. I mean, it's just hard to tell because, again, no notes, no written reports documenting any of that stuff. I could just see a lot
Now
of
that's
on and
very
offs.
unusual, right? Because at least in my experience, I know my experts look at that to see all the things you just said. Like, did they only power it off once? Did it go into airplane mode beforehand? You know, it shows what they did during their extraction. So, in your experience, is it unusual that you didn't get reports about the process and about what they did and why they did it?
It's not unusual to not receive notes necessarily, because you got to go through some extra motions and stuff to try to get those, but at least to get a written report from the law enforcement agency documenting what happened, that's highly unusual. And in terms of best practices, the way that I've been trained and the way that I train, it's, you know, you keep the phone in the state that it's in until you're ready to do something with it. So in this case, it was off. So you'd keep it off until you're ready to do that extraction. And then once you're doing your extractions, you keep it on until you're done.
Okay, so then I kind of cut you off with the 3 extractions that, oh, you did. You said that they actually did 3 separate extractions, right? Or no?
Yeah, because they did like the quick logical with the Celebrite, and then they did like methods 1 through 3 is what they called it with the Celebrite. And then I think they went back a number of months later and did it again with the Celebrite. And then
So it's
Mr.
hooking up
Cecil
to
did
the
it with
machine
Great Key.
again each time. It's not pull all the data once and then running the data through different formats.
Right. When you do the extractions, you have to start each one over. And you could certainly keep the phone on the whole time and never disconnect it and do that.
So, Stacy, a lot of people in the chat are saying that your sound is really. I don't. If she doesn't have a mic, I don't know if there's any way we can get her volume up. I don't know.
I'm too soft.
Yeah.
Yeah, people say you're low.
Hold on. Is this better?
I think so.
Maybe crank it up even a little bit
A
more.
little bit more. How about this?
I think it sounds better.
think
I
it
hear a
sounds better.
difference.
Do you hear a difference, Andrea?
I can't quite tell, but I'll ask a question. How about, and then we'll give her a chance to talk and see
Sounds
if it helps. I wanted to follow up on the temporary files that get lost, because one of the big mysteries that kind of surrounded the phone in this particular case had to do with a photograph that had been uploaded, we're told, to Libby's Snapchat. And apparently during the extraction, this photo was not found in the photos. It wasn't found in the Snapchat cache. It wasn't apparently found in like deleted files or anything like that. Like, it was just nowhere to be found. It was apparently subsequently hunted down from the internet rather than from the phone itself. And so I'm wondering, is there like cache data like that you would expect to be lost either over time or because of the powering on and off of the phone through the extraction, either associated with Snapchat or associated with deleted files or something like that? If, say, they took the photo, posted it, deleted it, is that a potential explanation for why that Snapchat data doesn't seem to be there? Is that something that you know? Because I know you didn't testify to it.
In general, Snapchat is the problem in this case because it's hard for a lot of the forensics tools to parse everything out. And so not everything in Snapchat is necessarily supported. So it requires some manual digging and linking to get all that stuff parsed out. So Snapchat typically requires manual work. Your automated tools don't do it for you.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, didn't we hear that all her other Snapchats were in some sort of cache or some sort of backup file or somewhere on the device?
I don't recall specifically if it was Snapchat stuff, but I do. Yeah, I mean, we know they had Snapchat data because they were pulling. They pulled like her last photos that she took in the car, for example. We know they had GPS data that they relied on that came out of Snapchat data. So we know they certainly had some stuff. It just, Yeah, it was a very big mystery that has still, as far as I'm concerned, not been solved about why is there no sign of this particular image anywhere on the phone.
And this is the image in question that we're talking about. So this is the image of Abby as she's walking across the bridge. And the reason that it's such a problematic photograph is because of the time that it was allegedly taken is minutes before the video starts, and you have a very clear shot of the north end of the bridge, and you clearly don't see bridge guy or anybody for that matter. And you can kind of tell where you can see, I can't blow it up any more than I have, but you can see both platforms. You can see the closest platform over on the right-hand side of the tracks, right hand looking at it, and then you can further back, you can see the actual would be the first platform that you would hit if you're heading southbound on the tracks. So you could get a pretty good idea of where she's at on that bridge. I've been, both Andrea and I have been out to that bridge. She's very close to getting over. You can see also how far back the river is. So she's crossed over the river. She's now over land, and she's getting close to the end of the trestle portion of the tracks. So, I mean, it's real problematic, and like no one knows where it came from.
And it's supposed to be 6 minutes before the video starts. And like you said, there's just no indication of bridge guy in this photo.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a strange one.
So Stacy, assume for the purposes of just this question that her other Snapchat pictures were somehow in a cache or evident somewhere on the device. Is there something about like exactly what Andrea asked you that would make the very last photo that she took just disappear if all the other ones are there? Or is it something even more unexplainable than that?
It's hard to tell. I could say that I'm not sure which photos were like taken by the camera and then shared over Snapchat versus what was taken directly with the Snapchat app and shared. So that could be the difference.
But you wouldn't expect it to be just like that one thing gets lost because they processed it so many times, because it got turned on and off, that you wouldn't expect to lose evidence of a photo from that.
I would say it would be unusual for the most recent thing to be gone first.
Because
Typically,
like one of
older
the
goes first.
It's usually first in, first out, right?
Yeah.
For data loss.
Yep.
And with respect to Snapchat in particular, now, of course, I had to go to my teenager to explain it to me because I don't really understand how it works. And
I don't get it at all, so don't feel bad,
I don't
Bob.
get it. Like they keep trying to show me how to use it, and I just can't figure it out. So, but at any rate, I know this much at least, that there's a setting because the concept of Snapchat was originally that the kids liked it because it would automatically delete whatever you set after a certain period of time. Now, I know that there was a setting wherein your friends could grab a screen grab of that picture, and or you could also, there was a setting where you could save it to your own photos. So, I mean, were you able to see anything like that in terms of the extraction report? Like what would like the settings? Because that was the one thing I never understood in terms of how apps work with the phones themselves in terms of cellular extractions. You know what I'm saying? Because they're really trying to deal with Apple and or a Droid in terms of trying to figure out what their secret sauce is, respectively. Like how much do they incorporate in that type of software to try to deal specifically with apps in terms of recovery?
Typically, they're going to focus on the biggest users of stuff or the most popular things. So if it's a popular app, they're going to have a lot more built-in support for it, where the tool is going to automatically present you this information versus something that's more obscure. And they're obviously focused more on the United States market. And so if you get somebody from a different country that's using what's native to their country here, the odds of it being parsed out automatically and presented in a nice readable format is really low.
So
There's just too much stuff.
So going back to the whole forensic image, and I don't know if lingo has changed, but um, do you ever get a forensic image of the phone, or do you usually get an extraction report?
The days of getting a forensic image of a phone are long gone. It's just because of the way they've changed them and all of the security. So we just call it a full file system extraction. That's the best you're going to get these days.
So is that any form of raw data, or is it literally you're getting the report someone else basically generated?
It's not a report. It is more of the raw data, but you're not going to have like you might get on a hard drive, where you could have like what's known as drive free space.
Okay, so can that data be altered? So is it possible the extraction report you're getting is altered in some way, or no, because you're getting raw data?
I wouldn't, I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be altered. They give us the report, we check the hashes. So, when they, because they give us an extraction report, it gives a hash of what the extraction hash was. And then we look for that to match. And as long as that matches, where you say nothing has changed on that extraction between when it was extracted with the tool and between when it was given to me. Now, what a person does on the phone, that's always changing information on the phone. And sometimes you do have to interact with the phone to get that extraction off.
I want to nail down on this just a little bit, if you don't mind, just because this is a little bit technical, and it took a while for me to kind of understand, what a hash is. And so, first off, correct me if I have any of this wrong. My understanding of how that works is that what they're doing is they run the extraction, and there's a encrypted sort of digital code that is created that is connected with that, and then that correlates to basically the data that gets fed into whatever software is being used to process and read that and generate a report. And so you can tell from that whether that aligns with the original extraction that was performed. Is that sort of off, or close enough, or
I think the simplest way to think of it is that hashing is just a mathematical algorithm. And so you just feed your data in, whatever it is. It can be a file, it can be a whole forensic image, and then it does its counting kind of, it's an algorithm, it's math, and then it spits out a long number at the end of it. And then as long as nothing has changed, not even one single bit, like you can't even change one letter, then it will always come out with that same hash, that same long number. If you change something, then it's going to be different.
Okay, so then my question is that hash generated at the moment of extraction, or is it something that the extractor will have some kind of control over when that's done?
It's done automatically as part of the extraction is being done with the tool. So it grabs everything off, it puts it in a zip file, and then once that's done, then the tool goes through and generates a hash for that zip file of that extraction.
Okay, and so that I think is the key point here, because if we were going to extract data from the phone and then try to alter that, from what you're saying, the hash would have been generated at the time of the extraction. And so if I go then and try to alter that data after the fact or something, if I knew how to do that, it would show up because it would know the hash would no longer match.
Right.
Okay.
And so just because I have to assume that there are many people out there that are kind of listening to some of the technical terms that we're using and having no idea what any of it means. And I thought that you did an excellent job at trial in terms of, because I always say one of the most important elements of any really, really good expert is being able to dumb it down for all us folks that have no idea what you're talking about so that we can understand it. So can you kind of explain in terms of, and I loved when you used kind of that under the hood analogy with respect to knowledge C, but can you kind of go through briefly and just explain what the different types of databases are that exist and what we now have access to in terms of these extractions?
Absolutely. So basically, everything on your iPhone is going to be stored in a database. That's how it's organized. That's how it's keeping track of everything, what you're doing, where it's saved at. And so the main databases involved in this case were the Knowledge C, and that tracks a whole wealth of information. It has like your charging state, the audio, that output that you're using, like are you on your Bluetooth, your wired headphones. It even has your battery percentage, like how fully charged are you. It logs when you're locking and unlocking your phone, if your phone screen is lit up, the apps that you're using, which app is on top, which app are you looking at right now. So that one is a treasure trove of knowledge always for us. Another good one is the Interaction C, and that's kind of like what it sounds like. What are you interacting with? What are your contacts? What are you doing with the apps as well? And then we talked about the current prior log. Well, that's more of a log than a database. And then there is, of course, the Apple Health data, and that's logging your steps, your distance, your elevations going up. And there are some other databases related to Apple Health that I didn't get a chance to discuss in court.
So with Apple Health, is it so one of our members had said that with newer iPhones, at least, that steps taken in health data can take sometimes 3 to 7 minutes to update. Is that your experience?
So I didn't really do a whole lot of research onto the newer stuff because I was looking at this for the old iPhone 6. I mean, it's old to us now. But what I will see about Apple Health data is Apple is a closed system. It's all proprietary. They don't publish how any of this works. And so to what your user said, now they've noticed like it maybe takes a few minutes for it to kick in. And anything that we say about Apple Health is either through other forensic examiners or forensics institutes doing the research and meticulously documenting it and then sharing the results.
All right, because her kind of question with that was like, is it if would the information have updated, like if the phone got powered off, which I think you're saying there's no evidence that the phone got powered off, right?
I found no evidence that the phone powered off until 4:33 a.m. on the next morning. It was
Okay.
on that whole time based on what was available to me at the time of my exam.
And if it had somehow powered off or shut down or whatever, is it possible that there were like steps that would be missing if the phone had like shut off right after them? And if that's the case, would they then get accounted for once it got turned on, or would it be lost information?
Wow, what a can of worms. So what I'll say is you notice like when you shut down your phone, it kind of takes a little bit, like, it just doesn't go off like that. So it's definitely doing stuff with the databases and writing stuff. It does cache some database information. There's certainly temporary places for that to be stored. As to whether or not it was just gone forever or got saved later, I'm not even going to attempt to comment on that.
Part of the hardship of it being Apple's proprietary functionings.
Yes.
All right.
So let me ask you this in terms of kind of your determination that you saw no evidence that the phone had been turned off until that 4:33 which we're going to get to when we get the flood of text messages that come in. Did you see anything specifically in the interim in between the period of time that the state claims the last movement was made on the phone and that 4:33 a.m. that gave you a good indication that the phone was still operating?
Well, yeah, one of the biggest ones was that aux input change where it was logged that something was plugged into and then pulled out of that aux input port. And when I say that, I mean the little hole at the bottom of the iPhone where you can plug in, your headphones back when we used to have to use cables like this all of the
Right.
time. That was the option on that iPhone 6.
Yeah, for all the young heads out there, back in the old days, they used to have an aux port that you used to plug in thing. They don't have that anymore on iPhones. So I mean, do we want to start getting into that right now, or do we want to wait? That is a whole area that I want to spend a fair amount of time on.
So then back up and touch on something else, and we'll circle
So
back to it.
Well, I have a question that's kind of related to this. How do we know the phone was on or off for, at what time? And one of the things I remember that I think it was explored mostly when you were on cross-examination, but it had to do with the phone's connectivity and when it was in service, when it was not in service. I remember that in your direct, one of the things that was displayed was some of the AT&T ping and the location info for the phone. But I don't recall like any specific like information that was brought out for, like it wasn't to establish a certain location at a certain time or anything like that. But I do recall this testimony on cross that the phone had basically been kind of in and out of service between 2:32 when it stopped moving for the last time, and then 5:35. And it was after 5:35 that then it was like completely out of service consistently. And so if it seems to me, if the phone is in and out of service, the phone would have to be on at least for some periods of time. And I was wondering if there was anything from your review of the location data, the app data, the things that were happening on the phone, anything like that would suggest any kind of activity on the phone during that 2:32 to 5:35 time frame, or if we literally just have like it's connecting, it's disconnecting, it's connecting, it's disconnecting kind of situation.
Well, one of the things I clearly remember when I testified is that I did disagree with some of the timestamps that the state was using for phone calls and iMessages and FaceTime calls being received. And it's documented incorrectly on their timeline because they were using the server times instead of the phone times. And so that misdocumentation makes it look a lot more like the phone was going in and out of service because of that.
I see. Was there anything that you recall from what you were looking at with that AT&T connection log that kind of confirmed what the signal status was or could have been at that point?
I also recall that one of the last pings that AT&T had matched up with one of the last data connections that I saw on the phone. I don't remember the specific time of that, but that was on the 13th.
And so let me ask you about, so like when you were originally retained by the defense, one of their primary goals was to have you try to figure out exactly how a phone that was clearly in an area where maybe signals come and go, but that clearly you can get a signal back there. I was back there. I don't know that they put any more towers up since 2017.
And some of the witnesses made phone calls from that very area during.
Exactly. I mean, we know Derek German made a call from back there. I think that Patty may have also made it. So I mean, but that was one of the primary things that he wanted you to try to figure out is why was there this 11-hour gap in terms of no service, and especially in light of the fact that we knew that AT&T was trying to ping that phone, right? So that was one of the primary things that they had retained you for. And did you ever come up with any kind of an answer?
The only answer that I came up with was that something external to the phone changed. Because based on the logs and information and everything that was on that extraction that I was provided, there was nothing to indicate something changed on the phone.
So could
my
that be
conclusion
a
was
blocking,
external.
like a fairway bag or a blocking signal blocker? Could something like that be
Oh.
the answer?
Sure, there's lots of things that block cell phone signals, and I mentioned like if you're in a lot of concrete, if you're in an elevator, a metal box, that's going to block your signal as well.
So,
And one of the,
go
oh,
ahead,
sorry, go
Andrea.
ahead. I was going to say one of the other, I guess, variables in this too would be the tower and the tower operationality. And it sounded, from what I understood, that was something that the FBI is primarily going to do. They can go do drive test data, or there's, I guess, other information they could get from AT&T that might shed some light on that. But we already heard from other parts of the trial that there was kind of some iffiness with the FBI's involvement in this investigation. And eventually, they were asked to leave by the ISP head. And so it certainly looked like none of that was ever done. Was there anything that you saw in what you reviewed that indicated any kind of effort to evaluate? Was there some kind of tower related issue that could have affected the signal?
I didn't see any evaluations like that. It was mostly the raw data that was provided by AT&T.
I mean, would you have, had they done any kind of drive time testing? Would you think that you would have received that from them in order to, really be able to do your examination? I mean, I guess I'm asking, do you typically, if that has occurred in a case that you're working on and they've done, that type of evaluation, do you typically get that?
Well, law enforcement would be the ones responsible for doing that, as close as possible to the date of the incident. And then I would say rarely am I given that information. Sometimes I am, because it's more of just a corroboration. Like, do you see this pinging? Do you see data going out? And that's kind of more of what I do with it.
I mean, it seems like an important explanatory piece of information, just from my perspective. If you can rule out that there was a tower problem, then that helps you narrow the range of possibilities for why the phone was behaving the way that it was. If you can identify that there's clearly problems, then that gives you a potential explanation for why it is. If you were running the investigation, is that something you would want to do?
Yeah. I mean, you would want to collect all the possible data points, and you want to have more data rather than less, so you can say, oh, I got data from the cell phone tower, I got data from the cell phone, and it matches. Mm-hmm. That's what you want to do. You want to correlate everything together. You can't just take one thing out of context by itself.
Mm-hmm. So could an explanation for, all right, if you're in like a signal blocker or fairway bag or whatever kind of devices Faraday, whatever kind of devices are out there, would one of those devices also block things like your steps and your health data, your backlight on the phone, like things like that? Or that wouldn't explain anything, reach all those different levels?
Any type of signal blocker, it's literally just blocking your antenna on your phone, so you can't get to the cell phone tower or the Wi-Fi. It's not affecting the function of the phone itself.
So there is nothing that affects the function of the phone itself, so that your phone is like not usable kind of thing.
No, it'd only be like an EMP or something crazy like that, but then your phone wouldn't work after the fact either.
Right.
But now, so like apps, for example, some apps require that you be connected in order for them to be able to function. If the phone is not connecting to the network, there could be some apps maybe that wouldn't operate. It's not that they wouldn't record data, it's that you wouldn't be able to use them at all. But as far as internal things that the phone itself is doing that you don't have to run an app to be able to do, those would continue to function. Is that a fair kind of distinction between those things?
Yeah, just think of it like when you put your phone on airplane mode. You can still watch a movie. You can still use your phone. You just can't surf the internet.
Mm-hmm. So for the black light, was that something, the backlit going on or off, was that data included in what they provided?
Yes, I did have the backlight data, and I was trying to use that to figure out, what was going on, what happened at 4:33. Was there human interaction?
Mm-hmm.
And let me ask you this, this is a hypothetical, but not really. So say, for instance, a human body was on top of the phone, and in your experience, would that be something that would block a signal potentially?
So I testified like I can sit on my phone and I can receive a signal and I can receive a call, a text. We all sit on our phones.
Right.
And I guess the follow-up would have been like, had the answer been yes, the follow-up question would have been, well, then what would have had to have changed in order for that phone to start then getting a signal at 4:33? So, all right, I want to hop back real quickly just to the Apple Health data now, and it's a bone of contention with me because what the state was claiming at trial was that the Apple phone health data, when they talk about the elevation changes, they're talking about going down. Now, is it a fact that Apple health data only records when you're going up, or is it up and down?
The Apple Health database records elevation only, and elevation is going up. And let's just say descents are logged somewhere else.
Okay.
And I didn't get to talk about that in the trial.
Can you talk about that now?
I'll say it like I tried to introduce it, and the prosecution was like, yeah, we'll get back to that. And he never looped back around, and
Yeah.
I didn't get looped back around either. But
Because
I don't want to give it away.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember it sounds like part of the issue had been that the data suggested there was a 20-foot change in elevation, and that was kind of a point of contention because we're looking at what's the elevation from the top of the bridge to the water, where supposedly the girls would have, been moments later and taken across the creek to the other side. And that seemed to be significantly more than 20 feet, than 2 stories. And we had some measurement information just there. And so that was kind of part of the bone that I had with it in the first place was, it doesn't even add up with the state's theory. So I'd like to ask a little bit about the reliability because, okay, I'm a defense lawyer. Always lay that out there. I got my own perspectives on things, but one of those perspectives is that when this data works for the state, it will be the most reliable thing you've ever heard of. And when it doesn't, now suddenly it's full of problems. So can you give me a straight answer on how good this stuff is?
It depends.
That's a great lawyer will love that answer.
Well, I mean, that's just the way it is because we don't have the specs. Apple's never testified to how it works. And so it's just from experimentation. I would say, like anything, the more steady something is for a longer period of time, the more reliable it is. But if something's, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then some time goes by and a little bit more, I mean, it's kind of all over the place. So it's hard to have good data points. I'd say it's a tool that can help, but just some steps by themselves shouldn't be your only go-to in the case. You should look for more information to verify that.
Sure. And I would imagine that's something too, that as the hardware changes in the different phones and as the software, different versions come out, you're going to have different quality of information pretty much every time. So unless you're running tests back on the, OS 6 on this particular type of phone, it's going to be hard to say with any certainty how, what the range of accuracy is or anything like that.
Yeah, you've got to go back and get the same stuff that's involved in the case. I can't use a new iPhone from today to demonstrate my point in this case.
So just because I know that I forgot to ask something and we're moving on to different topics, but kind of jumping back to the extraction, the full file extraction, are you limited or is it limited to the parameters that the person put in when it pulled the full file, or is it literally a full file and the user has no ability to say, don't include this, do include that?
If you pick full file system, that's what you pick. If you want to pick other stuff, that's after the fact. So
Okay,
you just
so-
say like, I want a full file system. You just
So
pick
if
it,
you
and then it does
hit
it.
full file, that's everything.
It's everything that the tool can get at the time.
Okay.
All right, now I'm going to jump back to the elevation thing because
Sorry.
no, like whenever we have questions, just jump in. I mean, we only need to be sorry to Stacy because we're hammering her from all sides. But so as far as the elevation change, because remember, the concept is that the girls went down the hill, and that allegedly took place at 2:31 p.m. That's when they have them going down the hill. Now that we know that elevation change is only going to relate to going up, where your elevation's going up, so we can then take out that as a factor that was them going down the hill.
It wouldn't correlate with down the hill.
Correct. It does not correlate at all to down the hill. So then, and I'm familiar with the area. I don't see.
It's flat.
It's flat when you get across the creek. I mean, maybe there's a slight incline getting in,
Yeah,
like, over on their side, but it certainly isn't going to be 20 feet. You
no.
know, considering so. Like I just like it bugs the hell out of me in terms of kind of their theory, and I know that you were shut down in terms of things that you probably would have wanted to get in terms of evidence, and that you're not necessarily going to be able to get in now. But I mean, were things like that things that you were looking at and you're like, well, you know, this is problematic, and then you were just finding resistance in terms of the state either objecting or finding out that those particular things weren't going to be brought up during direct examination?
So I was really kind of closed off from a lot of the case. Like, I don't know, even now, like I'm probably learning more in this conversation about the case than I knew when I went to trial. But it was just sort of like, you know, there was a murder of two young ladies. This was the phone that belonged to one of them. They were found by a bridge, by a river. The phone was under a shoe. And then I did hear some discussion of like, were they going up or down? And the defense did ask me like, okay, what is elevation? You know, and I did research and determine factually that elevation goes up. And then we looked a little bit at like some of the distances. You know, I provided them that information. But some of the other stuff, if I would have known more about the case, I feel like with, of course, 2020 hindsight, I would have looked at some other things and brought some other details to the defense.
Light. Got it.
Yeah.
So it's, and we're not going to probe you because, like you said, you're going to save it for a new trial or a post-conviction petition or whatever. But it sounds like what you were saying is there was other data in the phone that would have contradicted the state's theory had you known fully what everything was, that you could have raised other data points that would have been beneficial to the defense without telling us what they are.
Yeah, there's more data that could have been shared in court.
Okay. So go, do you got one?
Well, I was just gonna explore that.
Oh,
It's a
she's
little
going to
bit of
push
an
a
aside.
little.
But it just because this relates to one of my big grievances. Stacy, I talk so much about junk science on my channel and in just, you know, criminal work and stuff in general. We deal with a lot of it all the way back to, you know, National Academy of the Sciences, like 20 years ago, just about now. A lot of criticism of a lot of different techniques. Cell phone forensics, not really one of the ones that get subject to a lot of criticism. But in general, there is, you know, one of the problems is the potential for bias and just the more extraneous information that an expert, an analyst has besides the specific topic that they're being asked to give an opinion on, the greater chance there is that can potentially affect their perception and their analysis. And so I'm just wondering if that is part of the reason why you had limited access to other information about the case if it was for other reasons, or just kind of in general, what your thoughts are about that, the idea that it should be as much of a black box as possible with objective scientific testing.
So I agree that bias is definitely a huge concern, and that's why, like, personally, I don't follow the news of any cases, because I want to be able to take whatever case comes my way. So definitely there's value in not watching all of this stuff to come in with preformed notions. You want to just look at the facts. But I think there has to be a fine line, because if you would tell me that the state is saying bodies were drugged through the water, I might have taken that into consideration when looking for facts on the phone.
Like such as water damage.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Bob. If I can just continue for just a minute too. One of the issues that came up as well on cross-examination that I think maybe is related to this is the suggestion that, because you were limited in the scope of what you were asked to look at, you had these very specific objectives for your part of your work, that suggested somehow it's being steered, by the defense or something like that. It's a fairly classic impeachment type of strategy. Me being a public defender, this also grates on me because I have experience with judges who may or may not give the defense money to be able to do what they want, for what they want, with whom they want, and so forth. Were you aware of any kind of budget constraints or limitations on the defense, and whether or not that had any influence over the scope of what you did and any potential follow-up and things like that?
Yeah, so when she first contacted me to take the case, it was like, okay, well, how much is your rate? Well, what if this is our budget? How many hours? So, it was definitely a factor from the beginning. And so, we're going to start with X number of hours. What are your top priorities? It's not like we had an unlimited police force with unlimited hours and 7 years to work on this. So we prioritized, but even in the midst of prioritizing, it wasn't still that narrow. I still had to go backwards through a lot of the data, because yes, 433M was a key data point, but I still went backwards through earlier in the morning on the 13th. And then there was a big gap. So I burned through the money, and I shouldn't say that, but I worked and did as much as I could for what was paid. And then I said, okay, this is what I have so far. Do you want more? And they're like, yes, we got to find more money. And then I would say it was probably like 3+ weeks went by before they were able to get more funding to continue working on this.
And that's late in the game, so, and I think, do you think that you ended up getting the funding from the money that was raised from the fundraiser?
That was the first payment I got, was from the fundraiser. And then after that, I didn't get paid until after the trial, and the state still owes me money today.
Wow.
Is this typical from your experience as a consultant? Have you had an experience like this in terms of limitations placed on the scope of what you're able to do for budgetary reasons, and then problems with getting paid?
Haven't had the problems getting paid. Most of the time they come forward and say, like, hey, we got 40 hours or 80 hours. And then they're like limited from the get-go. And then we just work within that limitation.
Yeah. So I just want to touch upon the concept before we kind of slip into what I considered to be the smoking gun, which was that the headphone port was activated and or accessed, however you want to term it. But in terms of the water damage, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, typically on an iPhone, because I've had very minimal water damage when I've tried to take my phone in to exchange it, and somehow they always know, like, instantaneously. And I'm talking like my phone was sitting on like my counter and I'm doing the dishes and I got like a little bit of water on the phone. I'm not talking about like I dove in a pool with my phone. Is there some very, very easy way to tell externally on the phone that there has been water damage? And then additionally, is there a way internally that you're able to see whether or not there was water damage on the phone?
So there are ways to tell externally and internally if there is water damage, and that's what Apple uses when you bring it into the store to say, this isn't covered under your warranty. And then I would also expect to see water damage logged on the phone somewhere in terms of like the logs, the databases, because it gives you a notification, and those notifications are logged somewhere.
So in the full file extraction, is there a log that either says no damage or damage?
No, there's no log like that. It would just be catching it through the notification that pops up to the user that you see on your phone.
Okay, so no damage, you wouldn't see any evidence of that, but damage, there would be a documentary data point that you would be able to correlate that with.
Yes, but again, how long it lasts, when is it wiped out? I don't know.
So, but now let's talk about when you typically get a report from law enforcement of whoever took possession of the phone or evaluated the phone before they did the actual extraction. Does that have like it typically say, I examined the exterior of the phone, there was no water damage noted on the phone?
Normally, it's when something abnormal is present that it's documented. I would expect to see it on the chain of custody. I received a wet, muddy phone. That would be part of the description. I would also expect them to document it in their notes and in their written report.
That the phone is demonstrating the external whatever shows water damage.
Well, they would just say, like, I got it and it was wet and dirty and muddy and all of that stuff. You would just, write that up. And, if you're having problems doing the extraction, as you would expect if a phone is wet and dirty, that you had to try it 4, 5, 6 times, and you would just document that. And I would certainly document that in my written report as to why I kept having to, restart the extraction many, many times.
Right. And would you say it's best practices to, if that little pink light or whatever is lit to say phone damage, water damage, that best practices would be for the law enforcement officer to write in the phone, write in his report that the phone has evidence of water damage from the indicator light or whatever it's called?
If law enforcement saw any notification that there was water damage, they should have taken a picture of it when they were taking the other pictures of the phone. It should have been documented with a picture and in writing. That's best practice.
And is the little indicator, like on mine, I think it's back here, will get pink. I'm assuming that's it, unless that's something completely different. But it used to be like there was like a little thing and it would turn pink. Is that how it worked on at Libby's phone?
On the iPhone 6, it's a little more old school.
Okay.
And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. So I've got a question, and I just want to be able to check the box off. So in a world in which the phone was submerged in water because, say, for instance, 2 girls were led across a creek, and that phone did sustain water damage that somehow triggers the port 3 hours after they've crossed that creek, is there a world in which, in what I'm assuming was probably low 30s overnight, that phone could then dry out and then deactivate the port in your estimate? And that might not be in your purview. I know like you're more of the innards as opposed to the outwards, but do you know the answer to that question?
And so I had this in my affidavit. Based on all of my research, there is no known documentation of water damage logging an aux import insertion and then an aux import removal.
Right, because the removal, what does it say, out, or what is the?
It says in and out in the log.
So, because even assuming that Google search was accurate, which I'm obviously not stating for this point, what I was screaming about during the trial was like, but that is not the answer to, would the data say the wrong thing? Would your phone, would you not, would you not be able to get sound because your phone thinks there's something plugged into it is one thing. It's completely different to say that would cause the phone's data to indicate. And there wasn't even a hint of that because there was no way for him to know it. And it's all that mattered.
There's a world of difference between what you see and experience on your phone versus what it's logged, where it's logged, and how it's logged.
Right. I mean, because the
Sounds like some
problem
good
with
post-conviction stuff that we're
yeah. So I want to get it before we get into the Cecil search. I want to talk about so why don't you just, for those, because Andrea and I had the benefit of being there. Andrea took amazing notes. I took above average notes in terms of what was being said, but why don't
Here's
you
my notes from your testimony, Stacy. This is my chunk for you. I've been reading through them again to refresh myself. So
Oh my.
like a machine. Like I like if Andrea was behind me, I'd be like, all right, I missed like the last 6 minutes. She's like, oh, I've got it all. It was unbelievable, really. So in terms of kind of the ability to be able to know whether or not that, well, so why don't I skip all that? Here's what I want you to do. Would you just pretend that you're on the stand and I'm Jennifer Auger, and I've just asked you what your finding was with respect to what you found in the database, which Cecil didn't know how to read. He claims he saw it, but he didn't know what it meant. So it's really the bombshell evidence of the case. Just kind of reenact that for us in terms of what your testimony was.
Yeah, I think that came up under the, do you disagree with some of the findings? And this was towards the end of it. And I said, this information is on his timeline, but it's incomplete. It states right there on his timeline at 5:45 p.m. local time, there was an aux input cable inserted. And then later on his timeline, I don't know if he had it, but the removal is logged as 10:32 p.m. And that was just part of going through his timeline of events and the timeline of events that I could see on my side and figuring out what the heck was happening.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there is absolutely no way to misconstrue like that. It's literally in the report, aux in. So it's not like he was like, oh, I don't know what that means.
So for me to view that, I had to export the database out of my forensic tool and then open it and view it with the database viewer. And then I had to go all the way down to the very right. It was like, I don't know, 4,000 columns to the right at the very end. I'm exaggerating, but it's a lot of columns. And it said right there in English words, raw data, aux input cable, in and out. Like I didn't have to take any extra steps to decode it, convert it, or anything like that. It was just right there in plain English in the database. You just had to take the extra step and look at it.
And he did identify that he actually saw that. He just claimed to not know what it meant. Isn't that
right?
So, so my point is there's no way for him not to know what that meant based on you just said in plain English, it said aux in.
Right.
So.
Wow.
I don't think he looked at it. I don't think he went that far because you have to take that extra step and manually look at it or do a lot of scrolling.
I thought he said that he actually saw it but didn't know what it meant or something
Yeah,
like that.
he testified that the research wasn't complete or something like that. It was like this mystery code, and so he didn't have an opinion about it.
That's because he was looking in the wrong column of that row. He didn't look far enough over.
Okay.
I mean,
I was taking it more that he was intentionally leaving out evidence that would have contradicted the state's theory.
I don't know.
Like massively contradicted the state's theory,
Right.
like destroyed their entire theory of the case.
Oh, there's this bizarre code. I don't know what it means.
What does it mean? Og's in. I don't know. So, because I mean, my problem with Cecil in terms of just his either inability to maybe do a little bit of research to figure out what it meant if he did in fact find it, because I don't know if I necessarily believe that he did see it. I think that it may have come to his attention after he read your report. Is what I think may be the case.
Well, I didn't write a report. We didn't have time.
There you go.
And so I got hammered on that. But he did have in his written report where he was looking at that entry and he said one column, if it says, it might say 01 and it might mean this or that, but I don't really know. But he.
Oh, so there really was
He
another
definitely
column.
laid eyes on it.
Yeah, but he didn't look at all of it.
We're
at some of
assuming
it.
he didn't look at all of it. Or
Well,
he
I
might
don't
have-
know.
Right,
Based
he
on
might
his
have-
written report and his testimony that I saw, he looked at this much when he should have looked at this much.
That makes it so much worse. It
Or
makes
he
it
looked
so
at that
worse.
much and decided that he was just going to write about this much. One of the two.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like that kind of plausible deniability that he was able to kind of put out there at trial was like stunning to me. So as you sit in now, I want to talk a little bit about the Cecil search, which is what all of us call it these days. So you're in the middle of this intense direct examination, this bombshell kind of like and I'm sitting there in the gallery, like watching, and Andrea was sitting there too. And when this thing kind of hits, when it takes hold and just drops into the courtroom, and I can see I'm watching Nick McClelland's face, like very, very carefully. So, and it just so happens that they find that was a really good time to take a break. We're going to take a break right now. And I see McClelland talking to both Cecil and I think it was Holman pretty intently in that moment in time. And now we all started to file out of the courtroom. We come back 15 minutes later. Lo and behold, I think you were done, correct? Because
Yes, I was
ended
done
your
right after the
testimony
break.
at that point. So at that point, that was it. Like they called it for that evening in terms of whether or not they're going to put anybody else on. But somehow Cecil gets back on that stand, because I didn't think that they ended their case in chief until the following morning. So
Oh,
I'm
it was probably rebuttal. Oh no,
Yeah.
the defense called him so that they couldn't have
That's
time
it.
to right, because
That's
he
right.
didn't want him to have that extra time to come up with something.
overnight.
Right.
Right. Exactly. So that's exactly what happened. So they call Cecil up to the stand, and then he says, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I went out during the break and I Googled it. If there's something that could cause like a false positive on a headphone jack on an iPhone." And then he says, "Yeah, and I found it like right away." Auger objects. There's some back and forth, like in terms of where it came from. And I mean, when I Googled it, like after I stepped out of the courtroom, 25 minutes later, and I got it, and it was some Apple, like tech
Apple
group
discussion
thing.
group.
Yeah, Apple discussion group. It wasn't even like Apple. And I see, and so he testifies that either water or dirt can cause a false positive, to show up on the phone in terms of, but and you don't have any time at that point in terms of like to put you back on to try to rebut him, because you don't have the ability to be able to do it. So like, what is going through your mind in that moment of time when he gets up there and just like says stuff with no real?
Was
It's
she
like,
still there? You were
we're seeing
gone.
a lot of Ipsy Dixit in the Reed case, and that was like a massive case of Ipsy Dixit right there, which basically is just Latin for he just said shit without any kind of real substantial behind it. So like, what are you thinking at that moment in time?
So I was sitting in the courtroom watching, Mr. Cecil have his questions from Jennifer, and he says I Googled it, and then she comes back so hot. I was a little bit scared myself when she was asking him, and I was on her side. I'm like, man, that's just not how we don't do it. We just don't rely on a Google search. We don't rely on Wikipedia. That's not how we're trained. That's not how we teach people. You rely on forensic and accredited studies and research. But if it's accredited research, that's the best thing. You go to your peers, that's the second best. You do your own research and meticulously document it, that's the third best thing. But
nothing
Google,
nothing he learned from Google, even assuming it was right, has any bearing on what the extraction report would read. Is that accurate?
right. What you see and experience on your phone doesn't necessarily log like you think it might on the phone.
Because that was issues where people were like, my sound won't work,
Yeah.
And the answer was, well, that could be that you've got something jammed in there, so your phone thinks that there's a headphone. Whether it's right or wrong, they were talking about the functionality of the phone, not the raw data as interpreted on an extraction report.
Yeah, you have a piece of rice stuck in the headphone port when you put your phone in water and you were trying to dry it out. So that's why your headphones aren't working. So as far as
That's an actual thing.
Yeah, I know.
It used to be that.
The whole thing, it seemed so ridiculous even at the time because it was so obviously a forum for people who are users of iPhones and not people who are analysts and forensic examiners of iPhones. Like, it is clearly not targeted to that type of information. I found that so frustrating.
It's for me. Like, it's for a guy like me who knows nothing about tech, who's like, why isn't my phone working? And this is what's going on. And I Google it and I go into that chat and it's like, oh, you get somebody in there who might know what they're talking about and maybe they don't.
Help me make my phone work again. What should I do? What can I try? That's what support forums are. That is not what we're looking to do with forensics. We're not trying to figure out how to make something work again. We're trying to figure out what happened, what are the facts that we can report on.
And
especially when a man's life hangs in the balance.
Right. And as Bob just pointed out, in order for you to follow best practices and give it an in-depth opinion on his assertion about all of that would require, time to review and, assess, not like just right then and there.
Yep. And all of there's certainly a lot of things that could be tested, but it's going to take a lot of time to do accurate tests. And you have to do them like many, many times. I can't just do it once and be like, here's the answer. I got to repeat it a lot of times and have consistent answers and many times.
Basically answered that question in your affidavit as far as there's no evidence that would cause the data to read that way.
Right. And I also stated in the affidavit, I wasn't given anything, whether it was pictures or reports or notes or anything that said the phone was ever documented to be wet or dirty. Mr. Cecil testified that he didn't note that it was ever wet or dirty. But then they replied to my affidavit with like a picture of an iPhone with one drop of water on the screen as proof of water damage. So that's where we stand.
Yeah.
In terms of the water damage.
Frustrating.
So I've gone back through my notes of Cecil's testimony when he was on direct. And what I notice is he talked about the knowledge C, because the knowledge C wasn't something that he learned about until 2019. Before that, the science behind it wasn't fully known. So when he did his first analysis, he had not taken that into account. And that's why he then did, I guess, the gray key extraction and the further analysis. And so he moved in from that to talking about his timeline. And in his timeline, he notes, okay, the last recorded movement of the phone was 2:32:39. And then he has at 10:32:36, it's the last recorded data from the iPhone. And he says he had thought before that the battery was depleted, but now he knows that that's incorrect. Isn't that the headphone? entry?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the
Yeah.
knowledge
Because,
seed? So
because it logs it at
he knew it was
the
there.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he knew
Yeah.
it was there, and he even acknowledged that that was one of the changes he had to make to his previous report, that there was in fact activity on the phone. So he knew that there was activity. He just
Right.
apparently didn't bother to find out what it was.
Or he found out what it was and played dumb.
Didn't like it.
Right.
Well, so here's the thing with the knowledge seed. It's old like me. And so if you weren't old like me, you might not know that that's an important database to check in an old phone. I don't know how long he's been doing it or whatever, but I mean, and that was certainly the challenge with this case, is getting it like 7 years later. Will my tools still extract this data appropriately, or am I going to have to go back to an old version of this, or how much is it going to be manually? But I know Knowledge C was like the treasure trove. That's what you wanted. That had all the great stuff in it. So you definitely have to look at that if you're doing an iPhone 6. Super important to look at it.
Right.
Wild.
Yeah, it's that's one way to put it. So I is terms of, so I want to talk a little bit about the flood of messages that come in at 4:33 a.m. Were you ever able to kind of figure out how that happened? Because I just could never get over the fact that AT&T was theoretically, when you get that, you hit them up and you're like, look, we need you to ping them. They do it every 15 minutes and they continue to do it. And can you explain kind of like what the historical, because they'll put in historically the last time they pinged, and does that override? Can you explain that whole thing to us in terms of pinging and that data and how they record it with those pings?
So with the AT&T logs, they had all of those pings logged, like so many of them. And I think I recall, it's probably about every 15 minutes that they just kept pinging. I did see receipt on the phone of like when the sheriff was trying to call or text. I saw those messages come in. But yeah, the pings go out from the tower to the cell phone because they're trying to find it. And it also works with the cell phone going out, trying to hit the tower. It's always searching for the signal. So those two things would have been happening simultaneously when the phone was on in the middle of the night once they started the pinging. The tower's trying to ping the cell phone's on, it's always searching for a signal. That's how cell phones work.
So let me ask you, I guess as a matter of circumstantial inference, AT&T is the one that's doing these pings. If the problem with the connectivity was tower-based, would AT&T know that? Would they be able to tell, like, hey, we can't send out a ping for whatever reason? The tower is overloaded, too much traffic. It's out of whatever the reasons might be why a tower would go down. Wouldn't AT&T know that when they are trying to ping the phone?
I would think AT&T would know that their equipment is down so they can send people out to repair it.
And and I think this kind of goes without saying, but I'm just going to ask it to make it clear for everyone and me as well. With the out at 10 whatever p.m. I'll need Andrea's notes there for the precise
10:32:16.
There you go.
Removing the cord, right? Or the cable, whatever it is. The cable,
that proves
headphones.
for certain the phone was actually on. If the phone was powered off and non-functional, it would not be logging that. Is that correct?
Correct. Phones do not log things when they're not on.
And as far as now, as an expert, and this is your field, I am sure that entire last interaction that you had in that trial probably drove you nuts. How much research did you do after the fact? And have you seen anything that supports the proposition of what Cecil testified to at trial subsequent?
So before I did my affidavit, I did continued research to make sure that I was still correct, that there is still no evidence that indicates water damage to an aux input port will result in it logging. So I did my due diligence there before I restated it in that affidavit.
And if it's dirt, I mean, have you ever run across a situation where dirt somehow worked its way out of a completely stationary phone that theoretically is under somebody's body and under a shoe? Like, I mean, like, is there a way that dirt moves that I don't know about? I'm no geologist. I don't know. Maybe dirt does move. Does dirt move?
I am not a dirt expert.
Yeah, me either.
But again, that would not be logging. Even if dirt got in there, it would not create an input or output from in the raw data.
I haven't found any evidence of dirt and water causing a log to be generated of that related to that specifically. So I do have to kind of get going soon. So
Okay, you've been amazing. So
like
I
in
want
the
to
next 5 minutes, maybe. If we
Yeah.
Can I?
wrap
I was
up.
gonna. I got one more thing. I'm dying to follow up on.
go.
And this is what came up on cross-examination. You were asked about a video that was found on Libby's phone, and there was GPS data that was associated with that video. You were asked specifically about whether there was any evidence of manipulation of the timestamp or the GPS on that video, and your testimony was no, there was no evidence of any of that. I would like to find out more from you what you did with respect to this video. Did you watch the video? What did you look at with the video? What do you remember learning with respect to the video? If you have any recollection of that that you can share with us, I would love to know.
I did very minimal interaction with the video. I basically just verified, is this a reasonable date and time? Does the picture in the video appear to be somewhere close to the recorded GPS coordinates? And I watched it, and that was pretty much it.
Can you describe what you remember watching?
I think it was just kind of like mainly the walking, the railroad tiles. There was the guy at the end mumbling something.
Were you able to hear anything clearly that you recall?
I wrote it down. Let me look.
And while you're looking, do you recall, were you able to see a man clearly on the video?
I would say I could tell there was a person kind of in darker colors, and I turned that volume up as loud as I could and slowed it down, and all I could ever hear out of that was, "Hey guys."
Okay.
That's all I ever heard.
Okay, Allie, do you have any questions?
I'm going to, well, first I'll ask the battery questions that everybody wants to hear. So there is some sort of battery log in the database or something, right?
Yep.
So if the battery was getting low right before this happened, that's something that would be documented?
Yes. And it was. It has all the different percentages going down. It has earlier in the day when it went into low power mode.
So is there any evidence that it powered, that the battery life got so low that it shut off?
Well, if it would have shut off, that would have been in that power log that got overwritten.
Well, you'd see the battery at 1%.
There's no necessarily pattern to when it's logging the percentages. So I have seen in other cases where 1% is logged, and I've seen it in other cases where it's not, like this one.
Okay, again, if the battery died, it wouldn't turn back on at 10:44 to log out.
No,
to log the
a
removal.
phone doesn't turn itself back on
Right. So
by itself.
An iPhone battery can never regenerate itself without being plugged into an electrical socket, correct?
A power source, electricity
Right.
is required to charge a battery on a phone.
So
Okay, now
you're
I'm going to go off on a limb because I know everybody wants us to. If you do a search on Google for something such as, for example, "house long to die in the cold," and then you is it going to somehow later in the, I think the knowledge C base, does anybody know which, was it knowledge C?
Yes, it was knowledge C.
Change that time later, and you actually did it at 6 a.m., but it's showing you did it at 2 a.m. Is there any reason why that would ever happen?
I don't even know what you're saying. So,
So if you do,
I mean, it doesn't make stuff up when it logs. Like, it's just like, because it's got to log this stuff accurately so it could keep track of what's happening on your phone. And if it was all crazy and just made up and nonsense, then your phone wouldn't work.
all right, but here's what an explanation that has been proffered is that, let's say I open at 2 a.m. I'm doing a search in a Google window on my phone, and I'm looking for whatever, like who's
How
Stacy?
long to die in the cold?
No, who's
How long
Stacy,
to die in cold?
right? And then at 6 p.m. or 6 a.m., I go back into that same window that I started at 2 a.m. And now I type in house long to die in the cold. Would the Knowledge C database update my 6 a.m. search to backdate to the date, the search that window was open?
Well, the Knowledge C doesn't log your browsing history.
Oh, so maybe it wasn't Knowledge C?
Oh, it was the browser state. It was the browser
the
state.db.
browser state.
Browser state.db. Sorry, that was my bad.
What the
Okay.
ladies have done here they've slipped you very stealthily into the Karen Reed case. That's what they've
Yes.
done.
The explanation that was given was that a different search was run at 2:37 a.m. The same tab was then used at 6:30 the next morning to search Haas long to die in cold, and because of that, it showed up in the browser state.db as Haas long to die in cold at 2:27 because that's the time the tab was open. Does that sound reasonable to you?
I don't know. I can't comment on it.
Totally fair.
All right, go ahead, Dave.
I don't think anybody knows the answer to that.
I tried, guys. I tried.
So
Can I ask one more question about the video? One more about the video. Testimony at the trial from the state was that the GPS location changed over the course of the video, that it started off at some distance, like near the Canton school. And then as the video progressed, the location kind of tightened in and became more precise and was closer to the Monon High Bridge where it was actually taken. Does that comport with what you remember of the GPS data?
Yes, I didn't have any disagreement with it being wider and then getting more accurate.
Okay.
All right, Allie, look at your phone.
Okay.
Sleuthie's asking you. And then, so this is my final question. And a lot of people want to know the answer to this. Why was the battery at 4% for so long?
I don't know why, but I can say from my own experience of using an iPhone, it can be, just sitting there at a very low percentage for over a day if you're not doing anything on it. If it's just sitting there,
Okay.
it can sit there and last for a long time.
Okay.
And again, that current power log could have told us a whole lot of information, but that's all gone. So many answers we could have gotten out of that. So many.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Allie.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not sure. Like I might be missing some abbreviation here, but do things? Oh, okay. So things logging while a phone is off, if that Apple ID is synced to like an iPad that is receiving those notifications.
So you can have this syncing. We can sync between all of our devices. The Apple Cloud is the middleman, if you will. But if a phone is off, it's not going to log what it's doing and send it to the cloud.
Right.
And it wouldn't upload from the cloud either, I wouldn't think, if there's like some updating.
If it's off, it can't do anything.
Yeah.
If the phone is off, it's off. Nothing is happening.
But the phone, like the extraction report's not going to log a received message because it went to a different device, because you're looking at an
The phone.
extraction report for the phone. Is that accurate?
Right. And if it was synced up later, you can tell what messages are coming across from a sync versus being received.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been awesome. We are so appreciative of you taking your time to hang with us and get grilled for an hour and a half. So it was, we're very appreciative. You've
Is
always
this how
got
long I testified for, I think?
Yeah. and theoretically, you were supposed to get paid for that. Here, you did it for free. So we're super appreciative of that. You always have a place here. Anytime you want to come back, if there's a retrial, I'm going to hunt you down. I'm going to drag you back here. So
Well, you
maybe
can't
we're
till after
having a very,
testifies because
yeah, maybe, well, after that's what I'm saying, after the testimony. And we theoretically and hopefully are having a much different conversation. So thank you so much, Stacy. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
thank
All
you.
right. You bet.
Bye.
All right.
All right. Well,
So-
I mean, so what's most interesting, because she did say it without saying it, is that the phone, the data would indicate water damage if it
Mhm.
existed. And there is no notification of water damage on the extraction report. And
Mhm.
she didn't know.
Mhm.
Sounds like it's possibly ineffectiveness for not giving your expert enough information. I
Mhm.
mean, maybe it's an argument that could be made, but it's most assuredly a post-conviction petition issue.
Mhm. Sure.
that
New evidence or something.
Yeah.
We couldn't have known at the time because this was sprung upon the defense at trial that they're going to claim that, that water damage caused this data to be logged.
Right, they
So
couldn't anticipate that. I don't
so
think.
you can't now go back and you're not going to have the time to go back and re-research the extraction and all of that and the documentation of the phone. It's going to be newly discovered.
Yeah. And because strategically, as defense attorneys, when we are gathering the information from the information turned over by the state, we are
Mhm.
never giving them a heads up that
Mhm.
this is what our expert had figured out. Now,
I
had
would have been analyzing that data myself.
well,
While the
like
expert's
had
looking
Judge
at it,
Doe given them enough money for her to actually write a report,
Mhm.
the state would have been in the know and they would have
Mhm.
known at that point, which theoretically would have allowed it to get fleshed out in a much more meaningful way at trial, especially from Stacy's perspective, because she would have been able to dig in and refute it,
Right.
or one way or another. So yeah, I think ultimately how that thing's going to shake out. Yeah, it didn't sound like she did much with the video. I know we all kind of wanted. I knew somebody was going to bring up the video, but I didn't get the sense that she had like really dug into the video too
Okay,
much.
Bob, I just got to ask because I'm going to put it out there. What she described to me sounds like what was shown to us in court, what I remember in court as being the video that was stabilized but didn't have the audio enhancement where you could actually see stuff. It wasn't like so, jerky around, but you couldn't hear anything.
I know it was like because like I was texting you the night that the video dropped, and I'm like, this does
Mhm.
not seem like the OG video
No,
because, and it wasn't just you and I. Everybody in that
No.
courtroom, with the exception of the murder sheets, like said that they didn't see. I initially, when you're first seeing Abby, I did not see anybody behind her. Now,
Mhm.
15 seconds later, when you see the dude, you obviously see the dude. But I'm talking about
Yes.
initially, it
Yes.
just seemed like he appeared out of nowhere to me.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that's what I was
that's
asking you.
exactly, and it's so notable because none of us saw him, and we were looking intently for him. It's not like we would just miss him. We know that's the point of this video. We're waiting to see what do you get to see about Bridge Guy because all we've seen is just this screenshot
Right.
that they got and distributed. So we're all waiting to see what do you see Bridge Guy do? Is he close? Is he far? We're looking intently for Bridge Guy, and we can't see him on what was told to us is the raw video.
Yeah, and for the record, Lauren from Hidden True Crime, who is very much a Richard Allen is the right guy, he's guilty, said the exact same thing that we did.
Mm-hmm.
She ran to her car during the break. She said, I didn't see the guy. It's like the reality is we're all sitting there watching this video that we've been anticipating watching for years, depending on how long you've been like digging into this case, and you're trying to like soak it all in. And you and I are whatever, 35, 40 feet away. You're trying to really just see everything that you can see. And it's like, I saw what I saw or didn't see, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
But so then when they came back after they stabilized the video, or, you know, what they told us was stabilizing the video, it completely changed the orientation of much of it, because when we watched it, the phone is basically moving like this. And that's why it's so hard to see anything. So then when it's quote unquote stabilized, it's much stiller, it's much smoother. And you get that long shot of Abby with the man behind her.
Right.
That you can see for like just about a second on the full video. And so that's what if Stacy saw a man, you know, she was able to see the man in the dark clothing. It sounds to me like that's what she's describing. She's describing that video that we saw after they told us it had been stabilized. But she couldn't hear anything besides, "Hey guys." And everybody has now heard, you know, watched for themselves as many times as they want the video that the defense has released. That is the original extraction. And you can hear a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So I just have so many gazillion questions about what was presented in court and what we were told that it was, because it just really does not seem to be adding up. And that's why it's so important that we get access to those exhibits that are public record, and we should be able to all see for ourselves.
100%. And it's that thing where, because there were three versions. We had the stabilized, we had the OG, we had the stabilized, and then what they referred to as the enhanced. And the enhanced like blew my mind. I remember walking out of the courtroom and asking you, I'm like, what did we just see? Like, how did that look? It was completely different. Like, to me, the whole thing looked like I was thinking, like, did they somehow access the front and back camera so that it was never looking crazy at all in terms of it being completely stabilized, and in terms of it almost seeming upright the entire time? I thought that there was like a more of being able to see Abby running towards Libby when she gets to the end of the bridge that I thought that I saw in either of the first two versions. But then again, you know, it's like we saw these videos a total of 6 times. It was, you know what I mean? It's like we saw them once during the trial a piece, and then we saw maybe twice on the stabilized, and then we saw them one more time during closing. And I think we only saw the enhanced during closing, but I couldn't tell what was what at any point. What video, which goes exactly to your point. The entire purpose of having transparency in the courts is so this doesn't happen.
Yep. 1,000,000%. We're not supposed to be the record.
No,
I'm just
the record.
I'm just going to circle back, because I don't care if you don't know that they're going to claim water damage could create the out, you know, but they said they took the kids through water. So I would still have told my expert, look for water damage. You know, like, just because they traversed through.
It's a good point. Yeah, you know, the theory is that they were taken across the water. Can that be substantiated by anything? That is a good point.
So, but you guys, like she said, I mean, they had to prioritize the things. And once you get a physical use of the phone, once you establish the phone is on because it's logging out, it was, you know, something was inputted and taken out of it, you know, I guess maybe you're not so worried about that other stuff, but I don't know.
So Osbrook asks, how does a phone log sending a video with a message 3 minutes before the creation time of the video?
Yeah. What magic is this?
I don't know. It sounds like some real tech wizardry.
No, I would say that the phone log data is the right time, not whatever
the creation time.
Right. Where did we get the creation time on the video that they didn't have access to because it was gone? That's 7 hours. I mean, is that what are they? I think you guys all know something I don't. Like, where are they getting the creation time of the video?
Yeah, I don't know.
How does the phone log? Oh, maybe the phone data logs sending a video 3 minutes before it logs creating the video, which would suggest 2 different videos.
Yeah, all I know is that Michael Osbrook is a lot smarter than me. So if he's got a question, I doubt I can answer it.
Osbrook is he has been digging pretty deep into this case recently in terms of, because Osbrook, let's not mince words. I mean, he is certainly the one who prepared the motion to correct errors. So I mean, that tells you just how deeply he's been digging into the case. That was all him who wrote that. So, Michael happens to think that Rick Allen is factually innocent, and he's acting accordingly in terms of trying to do the amount of digging that he's digging. So, yeah, I mean, Andrea, it's taking all of my power not to start talking about Karen Reed and Brian Koberger because they're so much.
What we do want to know, has the new information about the Amazon search changed your opinion on just the strength of the state's case against?
So I obviously, if they can prove that, I think that's gonna be obviously extremely bad for Mr. Koberger. But I am very curious about, they're being very opaque about what exactly they have. And I don't know if you noticed the footnote in their opposition where this is all relating to the defense's motion in limine to exclude Amazon click data. And so the state filed a response yesterday. And included in that response is this kind of indication, which jumped out at me instantly because of the use of the passive voice. They said they had narrowed their search to the time when it was known that Brian Koberger had purchased a K-bar knife. And so that immediately, gets my attention. Anytime the police use the passive voice, it's like, well, who and how, it didn't just sort of like happen. It didn't just materialize. Like there was a process here. Why are you being opaque about this? Right. And if you look at the footnote 3 there, it's very clear that they don't have information that directly ties Brian Koberger to what they are saying is his purchase of the K-bar. It seems it did not come from his computer or from any of his devices. It seems it doesn't come from an account that can be traced directly to him. And so what they're doing is they're trying to circumstantially tie it to him through like transaction records, some other type of information that they're going to try to do to show that this Amazon user was Brian Koberger. So it's a circumstantial allegation that they're making. If they can back it up and have a good connection, great. But if they don't, then it's just going to be more white car. We saw white cars on video and we decided they were all the same car so that we could pin it on Brian Koberger.
But was it a family computer or? They don't say.
Right.
We don't know. They have this oblique reference to, they have a witness who knows, but we don't know if that means, are you saying somebody has personal knowledge that he bought a knife, or are you just saying there are going to be like Amazon custodial, people who will testify to their parts of this transaction that you're tying together? Are you going to say like Payne is going to get up on the stand and explain he knows this because of these investigative steps that he did? They're being very oblique about it. So we don't know how strong it is or how weak it is at this point. That's kind of my read on it. If it pulls through, yeah, that's really bad. And he's going to have a really good explanation, probably one that he can back up with something besides, his own testimony, which I think he'd be in a situation of really having to give at that point about why he doesn't have that knife anymore, because they searched his house, they searched his apartment, they did not recover a K-bar. So what happened to it? You better be able to back that up. You better have like an eBay receipt. I sold it to somebody. You better have a witness who can come in and say he got, it was a gift for me. He gave it to me as a gift. Here it is. I still have it. Like, you better have a good explanation if they can make that connection that it's his. But I'm not confident yet at this point from what they've told us that's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion that they have the transaction. However, I mean, for us, for example, our 30-year-old, for whatever godforsaken reason, is still on our Amazon account because I've sent more shit to
use their own
my
cards,
daughter's
but
house.
they're all through our account.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
all on our account. So they pay for it. But like I forget, and then I'll send something that I've ordered and it'll get delivered to our daughter. Because I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my God, there's so I mean, I see what you're saying. I think that we're ultimately going to see that a transaction's made because I mean they seem pretty definitive with that March purchase date. Seems like
Mhm.
sometime in
Well,
between.
but it's still, even that is a range. It's the 20th to the 30th. It's not like
Right.
a record that you
So-
would get from Amazon of this click and this purchase to this. It's a range. Like
That
why
is
why
weird.
is it even a range? It's
Right.
just
If they
it's
had
a little
transaction
fuzzy.
history, there'd be a date, babe.
Yeah.
If they had like transaction history, there'd be a date.
I
Yes.
mean, but all agreed. However, first of all, I want to give a tip of the hat to Hippler for his goddamn order, like putting
Yes.
an end to all
Letting
this
us see
stealing.
more. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Judge.
Thank you. That like I wanted to get that and print it out on like some kind of parchment and then frame it in my room so that I could just look at it and read it all the time and enjoy it because it's been and it's not just this case, it's every case of recent note that it's becoming not the exception, but the norm for them to
Yes.
seal documents coming out. And it's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I get it. And it's a whole different conversation that we could have. And it would probably be a really fascinating conversation. We do live in a much different world. I mean, the way that we have access to information never existed at any point in our existence. And it has changed the way that potential jurors can gain information about a case that they never had prior to. So, I mean, I get it, but the answer is not sealing everything that comes in because that destroys our ability to be able to keep an eye out on what the hell are the goings on in our courtrooms across this country, which we have to have. We need that transparency. We need to be able to hold the government accountable for what they're doing. And there's no other way to do it that I can think of other than complete transparency, so
Right.
And let's look at it from the big picture as well. It's in the interest of the victims. It's in the interest of the families that there not be questions about whether this is a reliable process, whether this is something that's substantiated and fair. The more open it is, the more we can have confidence that it's working the way that it's supposed to do. And
And they've
everybody
got the
wants
right
to have
person.
confidence in the court system.
that is such a hard sell. I've taken so much shit over Delphi saying those exact words no less than 1,000,000 times, and it's just such a hard sell to those that just don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? But
I know.
Yeah.
absolute gospel.
But there's always going to be people that want to, pardon me if this is a little strong in my expression, but it's how I describe it on my channel. They want to wear the victims as a skin suit. They want to be able to use that emotional reaction that everybody feels so much empathy for victims of crimes, but to use that to manipulate what you should believe or what you should do or what's factual and what's not factual, that's not appropriate. That's not scientific. That's manipulation.
Makes my
So-
skin crawl. It makes my
Yeah.
skin crawl.
Yeah, it really does. And so there's such a fine distinction between what is in the victim's best interests and what is in the family's best interests. And unfortunately, sometimes what they subjectively think and want.
Yep. And it's and it's exactly what you're saying in terms of what they're doing with that. And I mean, they've tried to silence me. Like
Oh, yeah.
Alan, it was unbelievable. You know, just trying to shame the hell out of me. Because like when I was using the Justice for Abby and Libby hashtag, specifically when we were trying to raise funds so that Richard Allen could have experts, which that was some new information. We found out that
They were
Stacy,
trying to raise funds.
I mean, well, I shared it.
We as the public.
Right, we as
Yeah.
the general
Yeah,
public,
I'm
right.
just saying,
So
words.
whatever, man. See, like you're falling prey to them.
I
Like
know.
don't let the terrorists win, babe. So as far as but as far as that goes, it's just it's so frustrating, and it's exactly what they're doing. And it's a shame because it's a real disservice to the people that matter the most in those situations, which are exactly the victims' families, because they're being misled.
Yep.
And So I don't know.
I'm going to jump to read on a very, not like a serious topic, but one that I want Andrea's legal input on. As far as the motion to allow a Bowdoin expert to say that they did not take the appropriate investigative steps, are you in agreement that that is definitely something that should be admissible and allowed to testify about?
Yeah, Ellie, I saw that case that you found, the commissioner, Commonwealth versus Dyer case, and so yeah, I read that over and shared that on mine as well. I think you kind of nailed it. It was a case where the defense was criticized for not offering an expert on police techniques and what is an adequate investigation and so forth when they wanted to be able to impeach the state on some aspects of their investigation. And so, no, it doesn't directly hold that you have the right to do it, but it's certainly implicit in the ruling that if you didn't do it, it's your fault. So.
And it lays out the standard on what they need to establish. So clearly they're allowed to do it. And I definitely read cases in other, like I was in like some federal cases in other states that like say the words directly outright, you know, like the failure to interview a witness in a murder investigation, you know?
Sure.
But I was, you know,
yeah, no, this is not some new strategy. Like this is not the first time that somebody has come in and tried to present a witness on police investigations and what's proper and what isn't. So, you know, what I pointed out on my channel is that it's very possible that the reason why this hasn't made it up to an appeal before is because the courts allow it. If the defense has an expert and you go ahead and put him on, you get convicted anyway. It's not an issue on appeal because you got what you wanted. So maybe, Judge, the issue is that nobody is thinking this isn't relevant or this doesn't constitute expertise, so they're not denying the motion, and that's why it doesn't make it up through the courts.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the answer. Like, you know, it's like,
I think that case that you found, Allie, I mean, kudos to you for doing the work. This is law. This is what legal practice is. You go and you look for the law. It's not something we think up in our heads. It's not something we decide what it should be and then assert that it is because we think it should be that. It's written down somewhere and you can find it. So,
and if it's not,
your job
becomes increasingly more difficult because you have to change the law. That's the hardest thing to do in what we do for a living, which is to change the law.
I did want to answer Kranken's question because she touched on it and maybe you asked this before it, but the Snapchat coordinates, she agreed because Andrea asked her that when it first starts, it starts out wide and then it narrows in. So there's no reason to think that it was because she sent it to somebody that was at the school. But
yeah, she agreed with that, took no issue with that.
Yeah. And the other thing that like really had me going was like their expert who's going to say that the shape of the tail light is consistent with the injuries. I thought that Alessi's argument was like absolutely on all points. Right. Right.
Firing on every cylinder, perfectly timed. The sound, just, you know, you get that hum. It's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, he's relying on not only is it in that was my thing with it, though. I was like, not only is it in his report. Okay, you extract it from the report. It's what his opinion is based on. Seemingly, I mean, why are you putting it in your report? And Brendan's like, well, there's a bunch of irrelevant stuff that's in there. What do you mean? You gave him a bunch of irrelevant stuff to ask about, which was coded in your question about, do you not want to create bias by giving too much information to the expert, which you asked Stacy, you know, and it's like, we were screaming that when it was happening. Why is he getting that information? It's Brennan's counter argument to ARCA should have gotten it when the answer is no, neither of them should have gotten it.
He should have had 8 gigs of data. All he needs to do is to do a biomechanical reconstruction. He doesn't need 8 gigs of data to do that.
And he certainly doesn't need facts that have nothing to do with a biomechanical analysis at all.
Yeah.
That whole part of it has just been driving me insane. And they did the same thing during the initial trial. Like in terms of that analysis, it matters not whether or not John O'Keefe's DNA was found on that taillight. Not in terms of that analysis.
Yes.
There's no part of that has anything to do with the physics of whether or not John O'Keefe's body could have caused that damage to the Lexus, period.
Mhm.
You know, and it's like, she just keeps allowing the Commonwealth to put forth that proposition that it matters when it doesn't, you know,
Yeah.
and it's really frustrating.
No
with
one
her.
saw him throw a glass. No one saw a car hit somebody.
Yeah.
No one even saw a man outside of a car or in a car when they looked at the car.
Yeah,
What
Yeah.
about
if I don't
that?
say so myself, I nailed it because I said, look, when Hank said all that, I said, Hank, you just literally described your own case.
Right.
Mhm.
Like quite literally, that it's speculation as to what they're talking about is all speculation. What you're talking about is speculation, Hank. You haven't been able to prove a goddamn thing. Otherwise, you would have got a conviction the first time around, buddy.
Do you want to hear my speculation? Do you want to hear my
Yeah.
speculation?
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Yes.
I don't often share my speculation, but I do have some speculation around the Tumblr canon, because to me, it just does seem like a little bit far of a length to go to just test a hypothesis that you have thought of out of your own head. It really seems like, I mean, this was expensive. This took time. It took effort. The FBI or the DOJ spent a lot of money on answering this question. Is the glass thrown consistent with that? So my question then is, well, if they hadn't just thought this up for themselves, if this was literally something that they were asked to evaluate, which I think is a reasonable hypothesis given, what's entailed in doing that actual testing, where might that have come up, and why may we not know about it? And here's my hypothesis. If that did happen, might have been one of the things that Karen would have told David Yannetti in her text on the phone. And we already know they had the early access to the phone. They were flipping through her phone. A whole issue with running into attorney-client privileged information. So that's why they can't just be open with it, because they were never supposed to see that in the first place. They're never supposed to be able to rely on that. So it's obviously rank speculation, can't prove any of that, but it would fit the facts.
But if she remembered it, don't you think she would have mentioned it like in her documentary when she's like, he went inside and then he never came out, and the music.
Did you watch that yet?
The question is, does it help her? If is it potentially inculpatory? He's mad. He throws the glass at her. It means there was a fight. Does that tend to support the Commonwealth's theory that maybe she did then get mad and back up, and hit into him? It doesn't necessarily help her if that in fact happened. And the other thing too that would fit in this whole picture is we know. Okay, we know they were looking out the window. We know they were looking out the window. They've told us like a million stories of what they were seeing out the window and so forth. So entertain the possibility they saw that outside the window, and they know, might that be like a trigger point for conflict between, say, Higgins and John O'Keefe? To me, it might, kind of make some sense about why things would like spill over instantaneously if they're already kind of, from what we see from the video at the waterfall, that surveillance video, it looks like there might be some tension between them. We already know there's this, whole issue with the romantic entanglements and whatnot. So might that trigger why things apparently went down so quickly? I'm just saying, it kind of maybe fits with the facts.
Yeah, well, as soon as that came out at trial, that the text message from Higgins to Karen, like, well, so, or whatever the hell he says, like, well, or whatever he says, and you have the concept that they're driving to the house. She's got her phone plugged in. It's a late model Lexus. We all know that if she's got her phone plugged in, that there's a likelihood that text may have popped up on her screen. And I'm talking about the text from Higgins to Karen. That incites the argument. That then has him going in hot. I said the exact same thing. I'm like, once I saw that clearly gave me a very, very solid explanation of why John O'Keefe, who was at a .286, who's a hammered Boston cop, and if you know anything about Bostonians and Irish Bostonians and Irish cop Bostonians, they like to fight, so like you would have gone in hot on that. And it really, it gave it a lot of plausibility as to how that thing could have gotten out of hand in that house quickly in terms of if you're buying the defense's theory, it really, it closed a lot of loopholes and gaps for me, because then it kind of made sense. Or if they're simply having the conversation and the Higgins thing is brought up, if she's like, I mean, who knows how it gets brought up, but we know that thing is percolating at that moment in time, as of that night. So, yeah, I mean,
I agree, Andrea, that if that had happened, that would be something the lawyers would say. You can't place him. The last place he's seen is on the corner of you and you driving away. That's a bad look.
And he's pissed at you, and he's angry and attacking you, and we're supposed to believe you did nothing about it and you just drove away. I mean, it's not really particularly helpful to her. But it also kind of explains why would you manufacture bumper sprinkles on this car? Right. I mean, the glass doesn't match. We know the glass doesn't match. Where the heck did it come from? How did it get on the bumper in the Canton Sally port? If you already know this piece of the picture because somebody who's in the window, looking at it, or because you read it on the phone or whatever, what you need to do to build up your hoax. You need to sprinkle the taillight pieces around the scene, and you need to try to get more evidence on the car too. How about some bumper sprinkles?
Well, it's the magic glass, which reminds me, I've got to get started on the 70,000 documents regarding the magic bullet and JFK's assassination. Allison started digging into that last night with like,
a lot of people were saying there wasn't much new.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've and then there's other people saying that the whole world was in on it. So it's like it's somewhere in between, I imagine. All right, Andrea, you're the best. We love having you. Welcome home. I want to hear all the details about that trip. I'm going to try to send my wife to y'all, but if I'm not with her, you guys can't leave her just floating out in the ether. She'll be a lonely girl out there in Vegas all by herself.
No, wouldn't have it. We'd never have it. We'd take good care of your girl.
Yeah, so you're amazing. We love you. Hey, make sure that I'm assuming that you guys have been throwing Andrea's channel in the chat all night. I'm assuming you guys have been doing that. My mods are always very, very good about doing that. As if you guys don't know and shouldn't already be subbed over to Andrea's place. So let's do it again sometime, like real soon.
Definitely.
But let's talk like Coburg.
Dr. quoting Andrea, "We are better than the monsters."
What a quote.
Yeah,
what a quote.
We'll do it. I have so much catching up to do on Coburger too. I haven't covered him on my channel since the motions to suppress. So, and there's a ton. There was like 40 some documents that dropped. So
you want to tell us one story from your trip?
Yeah, tell us your favorite story before you dip.
Oh man, I can't. There was so much. My girl Heidi, as I always talk about, she's the artist who did my fish, and my fish, are my banner on my channel and stuff. She came down to South America with one of mutual friends as well. She was down there with me for about, I want to say about 3 weeks. And we had such a wonderful time. It was such a great experience. We got to see some new things. Probably my favorite part. I love new discoveries, and I had lots of new discoveries on this trip. But one of my favorite ones was Valle Cochamo. Valle Cochamo is known as the Yosemite of South America. When I heard that, I'm like, bitch, please. Okay, you know how many times I've been to Yosemite? You know how amazing that place is? They're not lying. And not only is it so spectacular, it's like what Yosemite is when there's no road. There's no road in. You don't have 100 gazillion buses and tourists and motorhomes and stuff like that. You have to hike yourself in, or you got to ride a horse. And so it's just a magical place, really spectacular. And so being able to share that with people who mean so much to me was something very, very special and valuable and healing and wonderful. And I will never forget.
So reinvigorating. Like that whole thing just looked amazing. Like the shots that you would send were just fabulous. I was like, oh my God, I was so envious.
Now I'll have to go back and look because I
Oh
do
yeah, they were
minimal
like,
time on social media, so I haven't
she
seen
was
it.
not spending much time on social media, but when she would post some pics, they were fire. They were like just
Yeah.
unbelievably beautiful.
Well, I
Well, we're
share
glad
stuff like that on Instagram too. So just, it's about all I do on Instagram for what it's worth. But if you're interested in things like my pictures I take, that's where you'll find it.
Well, we're happy you're home and we're happy you're safe and we're happy that it was an amazing trip because
Thank you. It was
I mean,
awesome.
look, it was and you had earned it because coming out of that Delphi thing was like, man, oh my
And
God.
all those weeks before she had line sitters putting in the time.
Oh my God, dude, like it felt like and I didn't have to put up with that shit. And it felt like we came out of a trial. Like
Mhm.
it was very close to feeling like when it was over, like we had actually done a trial or so.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I really kind of felt like that because it was like just rinse, wash, repeat every single day. Like every day was the exact same thing. Like in terms of us getting home, us working all day in the court, because make no bones about it, that was work. Like we were in
Mhm.
there, there was no relaxation. We were in there busting our asses. You had a
Yeah.
whole different experience. Thank God that you had like wonderful people line sitting at some point to give you I felt so horrible for
I was
you.
wondering, I was like, how is she doing this without
I
sleep?
kept telling
Because I know at this age, a lack of sleep affects the speed by which you think. So
Yeah.
I
yeah.
was like, I'm not sure how like she's even thinking fast enough to write all this and then do a live and then write a petition.
And then sleep.
Yeah. Well,
for a
I
few
would have crashed at some point, I mean, that really is the reality. I would have, kept up the brave face and like, I'm going to do it. And I would have given it my best, but like you're saying, you can't, the body will fail long
Yep.
before the will does. So I will never stop being grateful to the line sitters and my
Amazing.
angel, everybody who showed up and helped make that possible, because it was, I mean, I think of it as like it was like running an 800 meter in the Olympics like every single day. I
Good.
like the 800 meter because it's like both a sprint and a kind of long distance event. Like you got to have both. Like you got to be
God.
really intense, but you also got to have that staying
Right.
power.
Right.
And then when she pulled the shit where you guys, once you got in, that it reset after the lunch break.
After
so that you were
lunch.
stuck in the courthouse in that line. That's when I kept going. I'm like, dude, you
Yeah.
need to go eat. I'm going to stand here while you get
Mhm.
out. You're like, oh, I brought a little lunch. I'm like, what? Like
Well, you didn't have time anyway. You really didn't, like even standing there in line, because you never knew when you were going to have to gather everything up and go back upstairs and line up there. First you line up here, then the bailiffs will move you over here, and you got to line up there. And if you miss your point at any point, and then it's time to go in the courtroom. And so everything is just geared around kind of keeping us off balance.
Yep.
So it ended up being the easiest thing to just like I know what food is calorie dense. I will eat cheese for 6 weeks and function. And then yes, when I got home, I did crash and I got very sick for a while.
Man.
But hence a long recovery down in South America, and things are definitely on the upswing now. So
it was well earned, my friend. Well, thank you for hanging with us tonight, and hopefully one or both of us sees you in the next week or so.
Well, it's okay. All right. I thought it was like, destination unknown type of thing, but
I didn't say shit.
all right.
Yeah, all right. All right. We love you. Be good to
All right.
yourself. Thanks for hanging with us.
Thank you.
take care, guys. Always a
Bye.
pleasure.
All right, bye. All right, let's thank some folks, and then you and I gotta go eat.
And yes, everyone who has not already subbed, I'm sure most of you have, just make sure you do it. I said thank you to our new members, Dana and Curious Liz, the generosity of Melissa with her always gifting memberships, Generation X Girl, 10 months. Hi, friends.
Woo!
Excited for the live. Thank you for your generosity, Afton and Annie. I mentioned earlier. Gen X again. Thanks for your generosity. Member plus the stickers. Aspiring court reporter, ad rev replacement. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Meg P with the 10 memberships. Dr. Vonda thanking us, and we thank you.
Yes, we do.
Lisa Shelton, thanks for your generosity. Got multiple
family
stickers
hugs.
there. Yep.
Thanks, Lisa.
Kathy's been a member for over a year. Thanks for your generosity. Melissa,
OG.
again, I meant 5 months, sorry, but still good. Oh no, she said I've been a member for over a year. Okay, OG, yes.
OG.
That's why I said that. I was like, what? Melissa again, 5 more. Thanks again.
Giving out the love. Love it.
Yes. And then Nola Mama. New Orleans, we're missing this year, Jazz Fest. Are they able to tell whether the snap was taken on her? Babe, we have
Jam and my morning jacket.
Oh my gosh. I do keep not booking things in court.
I mean,
I keep
you know how I am. You know how I am.
I told 2 judges already that I might not be here, even though we're not supposed to go. So I don't know. As opposed to Snap being taken on another device and then shared on her account. And I read this while she was going, and I thought she sort of touched on it with when she was saying that she can't really speak to why it wasn't there because they don't know if the picture started on the phone, if the picture started on the Snap. And but she also said that there's not just oops, this disappeared because they were doing I didn't ask the metadata one because they were doing repowering or whatever it was. ACV, thanks for your generosity. Pay for Justice. K Dog, thanks for your generosity. 3 pretty babies, ladies, and Bob. Melanie again, continuing with her generosity, or Melissa. Yellow Jackets. Did anyone analyze blacklight data? I did throw that in there. I saw your comment, so thank you for your generosity. To me, the phone not backlit light data not triggering suggests the phone isn't really moving around. So I don't know.
I don't know either.
New member.
Aw, family hug.
There you go.
I did it. I did it. I did it.
Sleuthy, I think you got that answer throughout this. We touched on this one too. 2 devices signed into the same account will upload the same video on all devices. Does Apple show which device it was originally filmed on? Do we know? So I don't think that she would have known the answer. She would have known that the extraction report, I think in the same way that it says this information's coming from a sync, would say, this information's coming from a download, not on the device itself. Oh, sorry, DB. I did not see that.
He was joking anyway. That was the whole thing, saying that she wasn't qualified to talk about AT&T shit because she didn't.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask her about that. I had a lot of you guys put geofencing questions in the comments, and
I don't think she the geofencing wasn't something.
They didn't let her speak on it, but I was going to ask some of them, but we got to the end. Sarita, new member, and she double generous super sticker.
Double family hug.
Tammy, thank you for your generosity. Any indication that information photographs were downloaded from that plug being inserted? And I saw this before, and I thought that she kind of answered that, not directly, obviously, but just that I don't think there would be any reason that plug insertion, because it's back then it would have been like the aux, right, babe, with a circle, so that there's no data device that would have fit into that back then, as opposed to.
And it was interesting because I was speculating last night. I think I was actually on the phone with Osbrook, and I was talking about the concept that back then, the AirPods weren't a thing. So you had to have everything was wired in terms of headphones when you had the aux cords. So I had opined to Michael, I'm like, maybe she had headphones in. Maybe she
that's what but I was thinking, couldn't they have done that like a noise canceling thing, or they put
I'm talking about Libby that day, that maybe she had plugged in headphones, that they were there accessible. But then when Stacy said that she didn't see any access to that port throughout the entirety of that day, other than those 2 times, it kind of poo-pooed my whole concept of it.
I
Maybe
was
she
thinking that kidnappers could have done it like a sensory deprivation type of scenario, but new member, Kathy.
Kathy Shank. Oh, that's a little play on Kathy Shank, the woman who somehow
Oh, solved
mysteriously
it all.
solved the case. Yeah.
Melissa Moore generosity 876 represents the number of days Rick has been in jail. How much data is lost each time a phone is extraction is done? And she did answer that you do lose some data each time, but first in, first out, with the exception of like the powering off log keeps the very last power cycle. So, whoops, sorry,
Oh, that's my fault. Oh, we thank you. Yeah, we did. We broke 39K. We're actually at 39.4. So we're like 39, like 4.5. We're close.
Let me know when we're at 100K. Thank you. Deja vu.
You're not gonna acknowledge 40,000. 40,000.
Did we hit 40 yet?
We're close.
We're
We're
close. Okay.
550 away. So
Thanks for your generosity, free Richard Allen.
love you, Deja.
What is I couldn't figure this if is
Stacy, we read about you. Thank you for speaking truth.
Oh, okay. Percocet. Thank you for your generosity of being a member for 11 months.
Tell you what, Allie can find some case law. She can't read some text like what do they call
Precocent.
it? No, I'm
Oh,
talking
you mean
about
like the about.
the abbreviation
Yeah.
shit. That ain't your jam.
Nick, thanks for your generosity. I destroyed my liver on 2 get me drunk fundraisers. Hope that gave 4 to 5 hours of expert work. She did say she got it some from fundraisers.
There you go.
Melissa again gifting
Wow.
more. Very generous. Thank you.
It's amazing.
Sally, thanks for your generosity. Great panel. Thanks, DD. ABC's docket. Thanks for your generosity. Thank you. Thank you. Idiot Win gifted 20. Ben's Diary podcast membership.
IW.
Thank you.
Coming
Crankin,
through.
I covered that. Thanks for your generosity.
Kraken.
Kraken. Sorry. I don't know why I keep doing that.
I don't
Dawn
know.
Burke, 16 months. Thank you so much for the info.
That's OG.
Yes.
Dawn
Thanks
is
for
like-
your
Dawn
generosity.
might actually be the first member like of Defense Diaries YouTube channel. Like, I'm serious. I think there's a couple of like super OGs, and she's definitely one of those.
Thanks, Dawn. And Lisa, thanks for your generosity. And yeah, she was excited that we brought up Idaho.
Yeah. Lisa's
Emily,
been dying to dig into some Idaho for.
Thanks for your generosity. Lisa still feels like she's on the other side now. I mean, Bob and I were sort of always on. Bob was way on it. I was a little further from him because I was noticing some lies in what the defense was saying. But, if they don't have an exact date, and Andrea's right, and I'm going to assume she is for now, that they gave a range, that does.
Well, they gave a range from March 10th to the 20th in terms of the purchase.
Right. If they had we all know that's not the way it works.
They're not putting all their evidence out in these motions, like they were just trying to rebuff. Like,
I don't know.
Look, be mad at me or not. I feel like they got the right guy pending trial. It's that simple.
Lisa says, if we love her, if y'all love me, the 3 of you regroup tomorrow and we go through BK documents because I have.
We so owe you guys a Coburger live. Tomorrow, by the way, no Felonious Friday. Allie and I are having to drive 5 hours for a memorial service for a dear friend. So, no live tomorrow. But I am 100. There were so many like Coburger documents and traces.
Is this the Coburger selfie she's talking about or something else? Thanks again, Lisa. Did you guys like that selfie?
Oh man, yeah, disturbing.
Yeah. Full throat motion. Thanks for your generosity. I haven't heard anything since Skin Suit. Still marinating on that one. Consider this payment for my upcoming use of that analogy. Which Skin Suit?
I forget who said the skin suit. It was either I think it was Andrea said skin suit. I think she was talking about how they wear victims like a skin suit. I think that was in that conversation.
Thanks again, Dr. Vonda. New member, babe. Mark.
Aw, family hug. Too bad if you don't like hugs, Mark. I'm giving you one anyway.
Lisa again, continued generosity. Bob, Allie, y'all are coming to my neck of the woods tomorrow and didn't remind me or want to hang out. We are, though.
Yeah, we're kind of in
Oh,
and
we
out.
are through. We are through. Yeah, we're in and out but
Lisa, you just weren't on the live yesterday.
Froppy and friends. Thanks for your generosity. And Andrea should probably run for president. Yes, she should. Aspiring reporter again. Thanks for your generosity. Petition for regular reoccurring Andrea collab. You guys have great chemistry. I'm sure we'll do it some more. Oh, another 16 months. I'm a
Boom.
super OG. Wait.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
Meg P is definitely a super OG.
Yep.
Yeah, like I wish there was some way I can go back and see who the OG was.
There's probably a notification somewhere.
Probably. All right, great crowd tonight. Make sure, please, for the love of God, like it on the way out if you haven't. I haven't even looked, but like we have like a 10%. Like if we get 20,000 views, we get 2,000 likes. I think that's kind of par for the course, but it sucks. Do better. Like help us get onto the algorithm. This was a really informative, good live. Help us by liking, sharing, subscribing, all the YouTube things. And if you're a replay crew, leave a comment, even if it's replay crew. That helps us get out there too. So you guys are the best mods.
Thank you.
You guys are like amazing. It's a full day of working. We love you guys. Mandy and Tracy, you guys, thank you for all your behind the scenes. Amazing. Like Mandy just crushing the sound effects today. Her hi-hat was a little bit off, but she's getting better.
I was
You
waiting
guys
for
are
her
the
to yell
best.
at you. I was waiting for like a sound to come yell at you.
I mean, she will. She just does that in real life. All right. We love you guys so much. Thank you a million times over. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Because without y'all, I'm just an old man.
Talking all day long.
Boop.
Hot